Hello guys, welcome to Dr. Night Stare. I know you guys come here to relax and take a nap. So before we go, please hit like and subscribe. By the way, also tell me what time and where you guys listening from. Alright then. The medical professional had a term for it, auditory processing lag. He explained that the advanced cochlear implant, an experimental model featuring a neural link processor, might require time to synchronize with Leo's developing mind. He might perceive a sudden noise, the doctor said, snapping his fingers, and only react to it a few seconds later. It's akin to a faulty wireless connection. It will resolve. But it didn't resolve. In fact, it became unsettlingly precise. One Tuesday afternoon, my son, Leo, and I were seated at the dining table. He was absorbed in coloring a dinosaur illustration when, abruptly, he paused. He gazed upwards, head slightly cocked, and produced a sound. Thump. Scrape. Leo possessed an uncanny gift for perfect pitch mimicry, a savant talent the specialists had noted. Even before the implant, when completely deaf, he could sense vibrations and hum an exact note. With the new device, his imitation was flawlessly detailed. I watched him, inquiring, "What was that, sweetheart?" He simply pointed towards the ceiling. Precisely 2 minutes later, I'd instinctively checked the kitchen clock, waiting for the oven timer. I heard it. Thump. Scrape. It was our upstairs neighbor, Ms. Albright, moving a piece of furniture across her apartment floor. A chill ran down my spine. The lag wasn't Leo reacting late, he was reacting early. He was apparently receiving audio information before it materialized in our shared reality. We began to test it, and it became a bizarre, private spectacle. Leo would replicate the low hum of the refrigerator's compressor, and 2 minutes later, the appliance would kick on. He'd mimic my phone's text message, chime, and 2 minutes later, the screen would indeed illuminate. Initially, it was fascinating. Then it grew tiresome. But tonight, it escalated into pure terror. We were in the living area. The time was 9:40 p.m., and the apartment was eerily silent. I was engrossed in a book while Leo played with his building blocks on the rug. Leo suddenly froze. The red block slipped from his grasp. His small shoulders hunched, almost touching his ears. He opened his mouth and emitted a sound unlike any I had ever heard from him. It was a sharp, shattering crack, succeeded by a wet, heavy thud, reminiscent of a ripe melon impacting concrete. Then, an abrupt silence. Then, he began to scream. But it wasn't his scream. From his small throat emerged a deep, guttural roar. It was my voice. My voice screaming in a pitch so high and terrified it felt like a physical abrasion just to hear it. No. Please, God, no. A different sound followed, a rhythmic, wet squelch. Chunk. 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 I sat there, the book shaking violently in my hands. Leo? He didn't acknowledge me, his gaze fixed on the apartment's front door. He then mimicked the rising wail of a siren, distant at first, then growing louder and more insistent. My eyes darted to the digital clock on the cable box. 9:41 p.m. I had less than 1 minute. I shot to my feet, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic, trapped bird. I didn't understand the crack or the wet thud. But I recognized my scream. I seized Leo by the arm. "We're leaving. Now." He was an unmoving, dead weight. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and vacant, and then he mimicked one final sound. It was the distinct click-clack of a shotgun slide. I instantly recognized it. It was the sound of my own shotgun, the one I kept secured in a locked case in the storage unit downstairs, a case only I knew the combination to. Then I heard the whirring hum of the storage unit's motorized door opener. Not from Leo, from the unit itself. I glanced at the clock again. 9:42 p.m. The handle of the door leading to the building's internal corridor began to turn. Leo covered his ears and squeezed his eyes shut. He didn't want to hear it again. Click-clack. He should have never started. That's what Arthur always told himself after that first drag from one of those beautiful white and brown cancer tubes. It had been 10 years since he began, a day he still vividly remembered. Peer pressure was a relentless tormentor. Arthur knew how it went. The desperate urge to fit in, to say yes to things that were unequivocally wrong. If one friend descended, they all tumbled after. Arthur now maintained a full-blown relationship with his addiction, and that was the most insidious kind. The kind that whispered he wasn't truly himself without it. He wasn't Arthur without his cigarettes. He stressed over those bastards more than he did his car keys when they weren't in his pockets, a habit that served as a constant turnoff to Alara, his wife, who didn't smoke. What was even more of a turnoff was the struggle to climb the stairs to their bedroom, his lungs too busy exacting their revenge, betraying him just as he had betrayed them. Stepping outside every hour for a fix was also a turnoff. What wasn't a turnoff, however, was the palpable sensation of it killing him. His heart thumping harder than usual, his head feeling like it was on the verge of bursting open, yet still unable to stop. That wasn't a turnoff. That was horrific, for both of them. Alara had begged him to quit smoking since they first began dating. She detested it, and Arthur hated that she hated it, a conflict of loves. This past year, though, she had truly hammered it down. His coughing had escalated to a violent peak last year, and it broke Arthur's heart to see Alara's tears. Every time she heard the gravely sound of his failed breathing from the bathroom, he'd emerge and she'd be standing there, waiting, arms crossed. "We've talked about this," she would remind him. He knew they had. Countless times. She knew he knew. But she also understood that if she kept reminding him, it would eventually etch itself into his cerebellum, priming him for guilt-based success. It took months, but with countless refreshers, Arthur finally made progress. He finally reached the 2-month mark, the longest he'd gone since his 20s without a puff. Alara celebrated this milestone with a cake. She literally baked him a cake from scratch, not from a box. Her bubbly personality never wavered, not even after all these years. She placed the cake in front of him, proclaiming, "You did ID, honey. I'm so proud of you," and kissed him on the cheek. Now he had to keep going. This was like a formal contract in the shape of dessert. He was going strong. The cravings never fully subsided, but he learned to live with them without giving in. That was his upward spiral. That is, until that day. It had been an exceptionally long day at the office. Arthur was frustrated to the point of not being able to think clearly. He could delve into the entire spiel of how it got to that point, but he'd spare the exposition. He bought cigarettes. That's all anyone needed to know. It was his first pack in 3 months, and the shame he felt was almost enough to make him throw it away after purchasing. Almost enough. Instead, he rushed to his car in the supermarket parking lot like some kind of junkie looking for his next high. He jumped into the driver's seat, and with shaking hands, he tore the plastic packaging from the sleek cardboard box. The smell, oh God, the smell. It was enough to make him drool. It had been so long, the scent had become a forgotten friend. But its return, it was enough to make him forget all progress instead. He popped one of the bastards between his lips and had it lit before he'd even left the parking lot. He smoked 1, then 2, then 3. He ended up smoking 5 of the things on the 25-minute car ride home to their cottage in Willow Creek. He arrived in his driveway, paranoid and sick from nicotine. He couldn't let Alara know. She'd lose it. He'd lose her. Her disappointment would rise to levels previously unheard of in their marriage. He did what he had to do, which was simply throw the cigarettes away. He tossed the rest of what he had left in the outdoor garbage bin next to the shed and walked inside like nothing had happened. Inside, he found Alara sitting on their sofa, fully entranced by some cable TV drama that she insisted on watching, even in the days of streaming. "Welcome home, my strong worker man," she greeted. "How was work today?" Work was, work was work. Sitting beside her on the couch, her smile seemed to drop instantaneously as she snapped her head towards him. "Arthur," she said plainly yet sternly, "what is that I smell?" He felt his heart drop. "Smell? What smell?" he asked nervously. "You know the smell, you liar. All you do is you lie and you lie and you lie." Arthur found himself too ashamed to look at his wife, instead opting to stare blankly at the fireplace mantel while she spoke. Honey, I'm sore. She cut him off. Shut up. Stop talking. You are not sorry. If you were, you'd stop talking. You are not sorry. If you wers, you'd stoled. Actually, you know what? You err. Sorry, Arthur, sweet husband of mine. You are a sorry, sorry little man. That one was new, but then again, it had been 3 months. He was so close. A sorry little man who can't stop fucking up, she screeched. Arthur snapped his head towards Alara. Her face was now blood red, and he could have sworn he saw steam rising from her scalp. Honey, I know you're angry, but please, I think you should calm D. Don't you tell me to be calm, you incompetent little worm. You are nothing. You are less than nothing. You are a failure, and that is all you will ever be. This voice no longer belonged to his wife. She sounded demonic, unhinged in a way that Arthur never thought possible. You are a failure, and you know what, Arthur. Her face was now boiling and blistering. Red-hot flames seemed to flicker behind her eyes and escape the wounds in her face. You're gonna burn. You're gonna burn. You're gonna burn just like the rest of the failures. Her hair was now fully engulfed in flames, and her face was melting off in disgusting drips. Arthur jumped off the couch and ran for the cottage door, but Alara stopped him before he could exit. She stood in front of him, her words distorted and twisted as she tried to speak with a tongue that had melted. Her face was turning this dark, ashy color, like she had literally been burned to ash, and he was only able to make out one final phrase as she crumbled before him. Do you love me now? That's all that was left in her before she fell to the floor, a pile of smoking ash. Arthur's head began to spin, and his vision started swimming as he failed to comprehend what was happening. He stumbled up the stairs to their bedroom, ready to curl into a ball and cry, but before he could do that, he woke up. He was in bed, Alara beside him, sleeping peacefully. It was his 3-month mark, and the relief that washed over him when he realized it was a dream was incomprehensible. He started laughing to himself, causing Alara to wake up and roll over to him. Seeing her face was normal made him laugh even harder, and he pulled her tightly to his chest. Someone's a happy camper, Alara chirped sleepily. If only she knew the night he had just had. Many might judge my sanity, or worse, my character. But honestly, I think I truly am losing my mind. My name is Anya, and I live in this country's sprawling, overcrowded metropolis. The older generations frequently lament that Gen Z is too entitled, incapable of enduring hardship, unwilling to persevere through difficult times. Yet I ask you seriously, who could possibly tolerate this nation's work culture? Your boss dumps a mountain of tasks on you just before closing, with absolutely no overtime compensation. When the work is finally done, your boss claims all the credit. It's utterly ludicrous. I'm getting sidetracked. I'm currently pursuing my master's degree while working part-time. I used to hold a full-time position, but the toxic environment at that workplace became unbearable, so I resigned. Now, with the new year fast approaching, my friends have made plans to attend a countdown party together, a typical young adult tradition. Hey, want to come to my lake house for the countdown? Liam, my ridiculously wealthy friend. The same guy who once notoriously bribed a professor for a top grade. Me, what do the others think? Chloe. Sounds amazing. By the way, does your area have any good connections? I'm looking for 2 small doses, low 456656765. Chloe, battling a severe drug addiction. Small doses is her slang, and those numbers are just how we type laughter here. Liam, yeah. Elk Liam. But listen carefully. If anyone tries to sell you something that looks like scarlet berries, do not buy them. If you somehow acquire them, do not consume them. Tell me immediately. He sounded clearly on edge, his voice laced with a palpable nervousness. Elk, saving them all for yourself? Lol 555678. Relax. I'm not in the market for berries. I was half joking, half sarcastic. I glanced at the time and set my phone down. It was already past midnight. I headed to bed, desperate for some rest after today's exhausting schedule of classes and work. I live in an apartment building with an underground parking garage. Many assume I'm well off, but the truth is, despite its pleasant appearance, this apartment is surprisingly affordable. Perhaps it's because it lacks complimentary breakfast or a swimming pool. Later that night, I was soaking in the bathtub, my mind drifting between school assignments and my job. I work part-time at a local coffee shop, the kind with a quirky logo involving a smiling owl. I was fortunate that my employer granted me New Year's Day off. She's a middle-aged woman, perhaps 50, who appears stern on the outside, but is incredibly kind. For instance, she often lets employees like me take home leftover pastries after closing. That night, I had a profoundly unsettling dream. I found myself in some kind of narrow, winding tunnel. Not quite a railway tunnel, but claustrophobically tight. Something was relentlessly chasing me. I ran and ran until the path ahead was completely blocked. At the dead end, I saw crates piled high with strange, glowing red berries. Am I losing my mind or something? CSC, SSC, SC, CSC, SC. December 31st. I arrived in the secluded lake region at 6 p.m. In truth, I should have reached Liam's lake house by 4 p.m. I was 2 hours late. What could I do? The city traffic is just magnificent. So, I left my apartment at 11:30 a.m. and finally arrived at the lake region at 6:30 p.m. And then I got lost. The GPS kept trying to direct me into the lake itself, so I just switched it off. Stupid piece of junk, GPS. I drove into a forgotten hamlet. The village was made up of identical cottages. Every house looked exactly the same. Some only differed in their exterior paint color. Otherwise, they were completely indistinguishable. It made me wonder if they all shared the same house key too. I spotted an old woman selling savory pastries from a food cart. Now, some of you might wonder, savory pastries, but why isn't the old woman selling from a proper shop? Well, back in the day, this area experienced severe landslides, forcing vendors to sell from mobile carts. They'd navigate through neighborhoods offering their goods. And you might ask, what was the regional government doing at the time? Embezzling funds, naturally. Back to the story. The old woman was ladling soup for a child. I pulled over hoping to grab some pastries. But I didn't have a plate. I'm such an idiot. So I asked the old woman if I could eat there and if she could wait. She agreed. I also asked her for directions. Ma'am, do you happen to know the way to this place? I showed her the map where I'd marked Liam's lake house location. Right now, you're here. The old woman pointed to a spot on the very edge of my map. Crap. You need to drive straight ahead and turn right. Keep going until you see the ancient stone altar. Take a left there and continue, and you'll enter the affluent properties. I turned to where the old woman was pointing, trying to commit the route to memory. Thank you so much, ma'am. I paid my respects and took the steaming pastry she handed me. The old woman's pastries were delicious. I ordered the meaty variety with a rich gravy. She made the filling incredibly flavorful and gave generous portions. I seasoned it a bit and tasted the hot soup. It was wonderfully smooth, with just the right balance of spice and tang. I tried a bite of the pastry. It was very soft and didn't fall apart. This is how pastries should be. When I finished eating, I left money for the pastries. I got into my car and prepared to drive along the route the old woman had described. I noticed it was starting to get dark. I'd better hurry. Wait, young lady. The old woman shouted, as if she'd forgotten something important. If you're truly taking that route, you need to follow this paper. The old woman handed me a crumpled piece of paper. Thank you. I took the paper and drove off. The old woman was staring at me from behind. I saw two emotions reflected in her eyes, dread and concern. The road soon became desolate, with thick forest beginning to cover the area. The paved surface turned to gravel, a telltale sign of typical budget mismanagement by politicians in this country. Damn corrupt politicians. Forest flanked both sides of the road. There were wide fields stretching out on either side. The atmosphere was incredibly peaceful. No traffic jams, no incessant noise like in the capital city. I was about to turn on some music, but an instinctual nudge told me to read the paper first. The paper was extremely ancient. It was covered in numerous dark yellow stains and looked as if it had been folded and refolded 100 times. And this was the message inside. All side G-E-E. Gurgi ye. Gurgi you. Gurgi you. Gurg you. Easy. Yurgi. Gurg D. Gurg D you arg D. Gurg D warg T. Gurg D war. Gurg T you are. Gurg turn back under any circumstances. Gurge. Gurge T. If you observe trees with branches that resemble gnarled hands, disregard them. Focus solely on the path ahead. Should you perceive faint, rhythmic whispers, do not attempt to decipher their meaning. To do so invites madness sex talks. If Eurohusian sex talks 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 Darks, 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 darks. Scarlet berries is dark starks. P8. S darks, tarch, tarch, dark, fox. You don't want your tongue severed, do you? S dark, yea. If you sense an immense weight pursuing you from behind, you must drive with extreme haste. Otherwise, the forest giants will crush your vehicle flat C, 9. Sujanizes, off 9. Okamanizes, ZZZ, 1 mine. Perversa ZZZZZs. AK here is completely illegible. Azizis. Bernard's 12. DA cares 12. DA Kaminizizizs. Bernizis. The AKZZZZZZZZs. Pers these and Kaminizi. O's and I go like I was that I go Benny Ion no William no. And don't worry, I meticulously followed every single guideline I could decipher. Before anyone gets confused, what's a forest giant? In the old folk tales of this region, they are ancient, vengeful spirits. People who showed disrespect to the sacred land or caused harm to nature. When they pass, their spirits become as tall as the ancient pines, with hands as wide as rock faces and a mouth as small as a pebble, forever suffering an insatiable hunger. In the morning, they are scorched by the relentless sun. If such an afterlife exists, this is definitely the last thing I would ever want to become. As I drove, my spine crawling with unease, I heard a sound from behind. It was a deep, guttural thumping, like colossal feet pursuing my car. Huddle. Hud. Hud, hud, hull, 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 crap, hull, hull, oh, crap, oh, hull. I floored it. I didn't even dare glance in the rearview mirror. And then a tree started to fall directly towards me. No. I swerved the wheel violently, dodging it by a terrifyingly narrow margin. The thumping sound behind me grew louder, transforming into the distinct rhythm of something massive running, gaining on me. The road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. Suddenly, a gigantic tree directly in my path began to topple, threatening to block my entire way. So I drove as fast as humanly possible, trying to clear the distance before it fell. Just a little more. The tree was almost down. Please. Dake. The tree crashed onto the road, completely blocking the path. But my car, pushed to its absolute limit, was just fast enough to clear the distance, so I survived by the skin of my teeth. Dake. Namo Buddhaya. Dake. A clash. A clash, a prayer, common in times of distress. And I risked a quick glance behind me. I saw them. The forest giants. There were about 5 of them, and next to the fallen tree, there were spiles of scarlet berries. Osh, what the actual hell? I sped on until I reached Liam's lake house. The entire time I was driving on that road, I felt strangely disconnected, my consciousness hazy. My awareness began to fully return only when I spotted Liam's lake house in the distance. I drove up and noticed the area the old woman had mentioned, the one with the affluent properties. There were many grand mansions that looked utterly uninhabited. I always wonder why wealthy people enjoy buying houses and simply leaving them empty instead of living in them. The party was already in full swing. I spent over 5 minutes searching for parking because cars were parked all around the lake house, even spilling onto the shore. And then I noticed there was another entrance to the property, right off the main road, that I had completely bypassed. Damn it. I'm about to go inside Liam's lake house now. I'll probably get nagged about being late as usual. Well, what can I do? It's not like I have a private jet like them. I'll write more later. See you. A couple of weeks later, no account of elementary school would be complete without mentioning the wonder of 5th grade camp. Deborah enjoyed 5th grade camp immensely. Emily and she shared a cabin with half a dozen girls from nearby towns, girls who'd never heard of Deborah's strange birth. Thus, she found herself with temporary friendships stretching for 5 straight days. With over 200 kids running rampant, supervised by counselors just a handful of years their senior, the mischief potential was high. Every morning featured a fresh pair of socks atop the flagpole. Every night, the counselors snuck out for drinking and opposite-sex fraternization. The teachers kept mainly to themselves, showing up only for meals and camp duties. There were lectures, sure, covering topics such as diversity and conflict resolution, but no one paid them much attention. One night, each cabin had to devise a skit based on acceptance of others, performances more painful than amusing. Likewise, the group's campfire sing-along was too corny to be believed. Deborah enjoyed the hikes the most. Crossing streams on overturned tree trunks proved exhilarating, as did sprinting up a rock formation signifying some bygone Native American rite of passage. There were movie nights, cinnamon rolls in the morning, meadows, pines, and firs. While no bears appeared, Deborah saw squirrels, raccoons, and deer roaming about, and even spied a gray fox from a distance. In Serenity Lake, she viewed a multitude of fish in constant motion, trout, bluegill, and catfish mostly. Best of all, Deborah glimpsed not a single specter on Willow Creek Mountain. No agonized faces in the mirror, no little girl with only half a face, not even a hovering howler. Phantom whispers assailed her not. The white-masked demoness made no appearance. Unfortunately, that respite would soon end. In Bluebell Elementary's parking lot, a swarm of cars, vans, and trucks waited to convey children homeward. Sunburned and dotted with insect bites, Deborah watched them leave. She waited and waited, tapping her hands against her thighs. But Carla Stanton never showed. At last, after 47 minutes of fruitless anticipation, Deborah gathered her sleeping bag, backpack, and worn canvas bag, filled with clothes and assorted toiletries, and began the trek home. While she'd made the journey many times, Deborah could now barely trudge forward. Her sleeping bag and backpack would not fit comfortably under her arm, and kept slipping down to the sidewalk. Finally, after much cursing and frustration, Deborah reached Elm Street. Residents gawked at the shambling child, offering no conversation. Seeing her mother's Explorer in the driveway, Deborah grunted, enraged. She'd assumed the woman was at work, but there was her vehicle, plain as day. Either she'd forgotten about picking Deborah up, or she'd deliberately stranded her. Opening the door, Deborah tossed her gear down. She began calling for her mother when a silver flash crossed her vision, accompanied by a whoosh of air. "Whoa," she exhaled, stepping back for clarity. The silver blur struck again, mere inches from Deborah's nose. Jumping back through the doorway, she saw her assailant clearly, a wild-eyed, snarling lunatic. "Mom, stop! What's wrong with you?" Carla advanced, thumping a wooden staff against her palm. Her eyes were bloodshot. She reeked of sweat and strong liquor. "It's Deborah! It's your daughter!" Carla twisted back for another swing, which Deborah terminated with an arm grasp. Don't do it, Mom. It's me. Her face slackening, Carla dropped the staff. Her arms fell to her sides. Deborah? Deborah? I thought you were at camp. Camp's over. You were supposed to pick me up. With the danger gone, Deborah closed the door. She hoped that their neighbors hadn't overheard too much. It wouldn't do to have two parents in a madhouse. Carla slid slowly down the wall until she was seated upon the marble, her knees drawn to her chest. She began to laugh, harsh guffaws that brought tears streaming down her cheeks. I was supposed to pick you up. Pick you up? What's wrong with you, Mom? What happened? What happened? She asks. I'll tell you what's happening, sweetheart. Ghosts are happening. I see them all over Coral Cove. I've seen them since the day you were born. I see them too. They're not that bad, for the most part. Oh, but they are. Don't you understand, Deborah? I've tried to have a positive attitude lately. I really have. But we can't have any privacy with those annoyances constantly popping out of thin air. Yesterday, when I was taking a shower, I saw a shrieking spirit in the sink. 3 nights ago, I heard our bookshelves swaying. I've seen shadowy figures in our garden, disembodied voices echoing across our living room. Just before you got here, an unseen force pulled me from my bed. I watched my sheets flew to the ceiling, while an unseen force pinned me to the ground. I guess that's why I snapped when you walked in. I thought you were another apparition. I could have harmed you. It's okay, Mom, I understand. But there's a positive aspect to all this, too. Yeah? What? If we're seeing ghosts, then that means some part of us will still be around after death. We don't just evaporate. Our essence lives on. I never want to be like that, forced to walk the earth without a body. Deborah awkwardly patted her mother's head, the same way that one would acknowledge an aging canine. You don't have to. You could let the spirit archive take you. Let it break your soul apart to construct a whole bunch of new people. The spirit archive? You've been reading too many fairy tales, girl. No, it's true. That's enough, Deborah. Go clean up now, you're dusty. When you're done, we'll get something to eat. Sighing, Deborah acquiesced. Setting off toward the bathroom, she heard her mother begin to giggle. It was a frightening sound. 3 weeks later, Deborah returned from school to hear a ringing phone. Snatching it from its cradle, she placed the receiver to her ear. Hello. Deborah, my friend. This is Bonnie. Hey, Bonnie, what's up? You know it's my birthday on Friday, right? Sure do. Are you calling about a present? Of course not. I know you'll get me something great. No, I'm trying to invite you to my birthday celebration. My parents are taking me to Harmony Bistro over in Seaside Heights, and I'm inviting a bunch of kids from school. Sure, I'll go. Can your parents give me a ride? Yes, we'll pick you up. No problem. House one Fridays. Final school bell sounded. Deborah raced home. After a quick shower, she found herself standing before the bathroom mirror, trying on shirt after shirt after shirt. Just as she settled upon a worn denim jacket, a hand-me-down from her mother. The phone rang. Hello? Is Deborah there? A male voice inquired. You're speaking to her. Oh, hi. Deborah, this is Marcus. Hi. Listen, I'm calling because Bonnie canceled her birthday celebration. She asked me to tell you. Really? I was with her at lunch, and she couldn't stop talking about it. Well, it's canceled. Marcus hung up then, leaving Deborah sputtering on an empty line. 11 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Deb, you ready? Asked Bonnie, wearing a bright floral dress with her hair neatly braided. I thought your party was canceled. Huh? Why would you think that? Marcus Peterson just called and said so. He was just messing with you, Deb. Now come on. Topper. Entering Harmony Bistro, Deborah was overwhelmed by visual stimuli. Murals, local artwork, and community awards crowded the walls, celebrating a couple of decades of the Seaside Heights community. Live music played amongst them, a local band performing. Board games and reading nooks filled the eatery's far end, operated by the chatter of families. Deborah and Bonnie were led to a row of long communal tables where 3 pitchers of sparkling cider awaited. As they made desultory conversation with Bonnie's parents, students from Bluebell Elementary began streaming in. A pile of colorfully wrapped presents formed. Soon, 4 pizzas arrived. Emily was there, of course. So were Marcus Peterson, Stephen Smith, Kevin Sakihama, and Ethan Williams. Mandy Munson showed up, as did Kim Jones and Martha McGuire. When Eric Mortimer arrived holding the hand of an older brother, Kim began to chuckle. "Why did you invite the shy one?" he asked. "I didn't want you to feel excluded," Bonnie countered, as the relative kissed Eric and left the restaurant, stopping only to introduce himself to the Rothsteins. After the initial pizza distribution, the last arrivals staggered in, Clarice Clemson and Mary Black, their faces flushed with probable intoxication. Clarice slapped Deborah's back as they passed, hard enough to leave a welt. "What's up, ghost girl?" she bellowed. The kids ate pizza, played board games, and refilled their cider glasses continuously. Then, after a rousing rendition of Happy Birthday, it was time for presents. Deborah gifted Bonnie a stack of comics, including a 4th printing edition of The Return of Wonder Woman. Emily gave her Dino Park Tycoon, a handheld game. As shredded wrapping paper accumulated, Bonnie unveiled CDs, video cassettes, candy, and an unwanted Bible from Eric. When the last present had been opened, a joke book from Clarice and Mary Bonnie's parents announced that they'd be waiting in the minivan. Throughout the evening, Marcus had neither spoken to nor glanced at Deborah. She hadn't dared to ask him about the phone call. Perhaps he hated her so much that he couldn't even stand her proximity. "Thank goodness they're finally gone," said Bonnie. From her skirt pocket, she drew forth a small, empty, sparkling cider bottle. Waving stray classmates back to the table, she told the boys to space themselves between the girls. "We're going to play a little game," she announced. "Are you all ready to spin this bottle?" "No way," complained Marcus. "I'm not playing if there's a chance I have to kiss Ghost Girl." "Me neither," announced Stephen haughtily. Clarice chimed in. "You heard them, Deb. Go wait in the minivan with Bonnie's parents. Nobody wants you here." "Nonsense," snapped Bonnie. "Deborah is one of my best friends, and if she's not going to play, no one will." "Yeah, shut up, Clarice," said Emily, scowling. Stephen climbed out of his chair. "Let's go read some books," he demanded, his petite mouth drawn thin. "I'm with you," said Marcus. "Come on, Ethan." Ethan glanced from Marcus to Emily. "I'm staying here," he said. Their noses held high, Stephen and Marcus strode off, leaving 8 girls and 3 boys at the table. "Darn, they had to go and throw off the balance," said Mandy Munson. Her bright scarf was neatly tied, revealing a smooth, fair neck. "Why don't I play a board game?" Deborah whispered to Bonnie. "I don't want to ruin your party." "You're not ruining anything. Those guys knew we'd be playing Spin the Bottle, I told them this morning. If they want to exclude my friend, then forget them." Now Marcus's call made sense. He'd wanted to play Spin the Bottle, just not with Deborah. "Besides," said Emily, "we still have 3 charming gentlemen to smooch." She winked at Ethan, and he looked at the table, embarrassed. "2 of them, anyway," said Martha McGuire, an obvious jab at Eric. As the birthday girl, Bonnie took the first spin. She found herself locking lips with Kevin, knocking his thick-framed glasses from his head in the process. Ethan spun next, with her bottle landing on Mary. Slightly awkward, the boy gave her a quick peck. Next, Kim gave the bottle a spin. It landed on Emily, so she got another try. That spin landed on Kevin, who remembered to remove his glasses. Martha kissed Eric. Eric kissed Emily. When Clarice got a chance to kiss Kevin, she grabbed the back of his head, thrusting her tongue deep within his mouth. When she finally pulled away, the boy looked positively queasy, dry heaving to the sound of Mary's boisterous laughter. Then it was Deborah's turn. Never having been kissed before, she was a bundle of trembling hands. Her hand was so clammy that she could barely grip the bottle. "Spin it, coward," cried Mary. "What, you afraid of boys or something?" "No, I'm not afraid of you," was Deborah's meek retort. She wiped her hand on her shirt and gripped the bottle. Just as she was about to revolve it, a hand fell upon her shoulder. Deborah looked up to see the friendly face of a Harmony Bistro employee. "I'm sorry, children, but you can't be making out in our establishment. There are families here." Clarice and Mary booed vociferously, but the man was unfazed. Marcus and Steven stood just behind him, obviously responsible for spoiling Deborah's big moment. After confiscating the bottle, the employee walked away, leaving the children nothing to do but play board games. One by one, their parents arrived to retrieve them. Just before Eric left, he pulled Deborah aside. "I'm sorry that you didn't get a kiss. I'll kiss you now, if you want." Blushing with embarrassment, Deborah said, "I guess so." The boy pecked her on the lips, and then skipped out of the restaurant alongside his older brother. "Did you girls have fun?" asked Ms. Rothstein in the minivan on the drive home. "I sure did." "Thanks, Mom." "Thanks, Dad." "And you, Deborah?" "Yes, it was great," she replied, still tasting cherry candy and pizza. That night, as Deborah replayed the day's events in lieu of slumber, a shifting mist swam from the shadows to caress her cheek. The mist trailed up to a veiled face, drifting in an aura of decay. Floating in a relentlessly churning shroud, the entity addressed Deborah. "You're beginning to see, aren't you? No matter how hard you try, you'll never truly belong. The popular boys will never seek you out, would prefer to ignore you entirely. The best you can hope for is a sympathetic gesture." Deborah knew that argumentation was useless, and so she lay silently, hoping to ignore the intruder into oblivion. "You and I have a grand destiny before us, girl. Through your being, I will shake the world from its complacency. You will come to see humanity as I do. See mankind for what it truly is, a flawed creation destined for oblivion." S. The veiled face floated closer to press against Deborah's face. Its touch was so glacial that, even as her stomach twisted in fear, Deborah still couldn't escape the chill. She blinked, and the intruder was gone, leaving Deborah's cold, heavy dread permeating the room. Tears cascaded down her face, accompanied by quiet whimpers. On trembling limbs, Deborah lurched up from the bed. Grimacing, she stripped it down to the mattress. It was time to do some laundry. The following Monday, Deborah and Emily sat at a cafeteria table, having abandoned the playground for the foreseeable future. Conversations surrounded them, but the duo sat quietly, their thoughts sailing along divergent streams. It was cheeseburger day. Their trays held the remains of burgers and fries, ketchup spread in abstract smears. Around Deborah's tray, a fly sluggishly flew, buzzing to acknowledge its repast. Curiously, even though the lunch period was almost over, Bonnie still hadn't arrived. She'd been in class earlier, yet had lingered behind as they'd headed to the cafeteria. Whether she was ditching for the rest of the day or had gone to the nurse's office, neither girl knew. As she idly drummed her fingers against the plastic tabletop, Emily actually found herself anxious for the bell to ring. Without Bonnie around to liven things up, Deborah was somewhat reserved. She was so withdrawn, so socially awkward, that it took an outgoing personality such as Bonnie's to bring her even partially out of her shell. Deborah stared forward, seeing nothing. Instead, her thoughts were on the veiled entity. She'd seen a chilling Gothic novel recently, and wondered if she could be rid of her nocturnal visitor by performing her own protective ritual. Persuading a sage to perform an exorcism would be too embarrassing, but Deborah could easily get a hold of ancient texts and some blessed herbs. From there, she could imitate the actions of wise elders. But would the gambit work, or would it just anger the entity, provoking her toward further acts of mental torment? Lost in their own musings, the two friends were oblivious to Bonnie's arrival. Only after the girl distinctly cleared her throat did their eyes fall upon her. "Whoa, what is this?" asked Emily, for their pal had not arrived alone. Their hands tightly linked, Bonnie and Kevin Sakihama stood boldly at the table's head, sharing sidelong glances. "I asked Kevin out," Bonnie said matter-of-factly. "He's your boyfriend now?" asked Deborah. "He is." With Bonnie's tall stature and Kevin's slender frame, the pairing was comically incongruous. Her long fingers gently entwined his slender hand. His head barely came up to Bonnie's shoulders. Still, they seemed content, and neither Emily nor Deborah could deny them that. "Why don't you guys sit down?" Emily suggested. The couple acquiesced, sliding onto the bench, wrapping their arms around each other. For the rest of the lunch period, Bonnie and Kevin had eyes only for one another. They whispered quietly amongst themselves, so subdued that their conversation remained private. Deborah and Emily found themselves in the same situation as before, letting the minutes spin out slowly. Francis, you back? The apparition hovered in her gleaming, shimmering gown, her smile strained under its ethereal glow. It's good to see you, Deborah. France, where have you been? I haven't seen you in forever. Francis sighed. I've been with the rest of the spirits, nestled within your slight frame. The entity with the veiled face is growing stronger, and she's making it harder for me to manifest. I don't think she wants you to see a friendly face. Deborah turned off the music. The thought of the veiled entity made her break out in flop sweat. You know her? Why won't she leave me alone? Do you remember that conversation we had, the one I encouraged you to record? Yes, I do. I review it often. Good. Do you remember when I mentioned that some parts of an individual's personality don't simply dissolve into the ethereal mist? Yeah, you said that they merge together to form wraiths and other frightening presences. True. Certain personality components are too complex to form within an infant's developing soul. They emerge later, after prolonged exposure to the world's cruelties. A newborn understands nothing of terror or malice. Indeed, they struggle merely to comprehend the vastness of existence outside the womb. Anyway, such traits are unnecessary in crafting a new soul. Instead, they linger around the spirit archive, drawn to similar aspects. When enough coalesce, they can amalgamate. The results are never pleasant and are responsible for many of humanity's most harrowing visions. Of all those entities, that veiled fiend is probably the most formidable. She's not truly female, just something that assumes that form. No, that malevolent entity is forged from the hatreds and fears of millions of torture victims, individuals forced to endure some of the most grotesque punishments imaginable. Cass, consider this, Deborah. While most of us perceive both positive and negative qualities in those we meet, that distorted presence sees only the negative. She knows nothing of love, nothing of compassion. She knows only the agony of an eyeball being gouged, the sting of 1,000 cuts, and other such torments. Ouch. Indeed. Imagine the madness that erupts after hours of torture. Now imagine that madness multiplied by millions of lifetimes. That's the force you're contending with here. And how do you know so much about her? Oh, I know all the entities within you. It's impossible to be in such constant proximity and not absorb at least some kind of impression. Especially this one, she radiates agony and terror, like a breached energy core. She remembers the camps, the searing gas of Auschwitz, having her muscles removed without anesthesia at Buchenwald. In 100 BC, she was flayed alive in the Roman Forum under the orders of a vicious tyrant named Sulla. She's been entombed in a metal casket to be slowly devoured by insects. She's worn the Spanish boot, sat upon the Judas cradle, endured the Glasgow smile, and languished inside an Iron Maiden. In Japan, she suffered a slow death by water torture. She's been impaled, had her bones shattered upon the breaking wheel, roasted inside a brazen bull. Issy. Imagine being whipped, hung from meat hooks, subjected to unspeakable acts, boiled alive, burned at the stake, flayed, disemboweled, and having your limbs pulled from their sockets. Now imagine reliving that suffering over and over again throughout eternity. That's her perpetual state of mind. Sheesh, I mean, what am I supposed to say to that? Isn't there any way to be free of her? None that I'm aware of. She'll always be present, trying to influence you. The important thing is to ignore her. You're a good person, Deborah, and you need to hold on to that no matter the cost. I'll try. Good, that's good. Deborah brightened up. Anyway, I'm glad you came to visit. I've missed you, Francis. None of the other spirits are any fun. Most of them are quite eerie. Can you stay for a while? I'm not sure how long I'll be able to manifest, but I'll try to hold on to this form for a bit. Tell me, what's been happening with our old friends, the Defenders? Oh, wow. You have to hear what happened to Iron Fist. Dr. Doom drained all his chi when they were battling in the astral plane. Then the Sorcerer Supreme got really angry, and he... On Saturday morning, Bonnie woke up face down on her living room ottoman, drooling onto the velvet. Her eyes itched and her throat was sore, so she went to the kitchen for a drink. The area was empty. Her parents were still asleep. Nestled between the milk and apple cider was a carton of berry juice, which looked pretty damn refreshing. She pulled a glass from the cupboard and began to pour. What emerged was not berry-colored at all. Instead, the liquid was dark crimson. Thick and syrupy, it poured slowly, coating the side of the glass. Gagging, Bonnie returned the carton to the fridge. From past experience, she knew that her parents would see plain old berry juice when they poured, but that thought provided her small comfort. She pulled a stool to the cabinet to reach the cupboards above it. The cabinet contained an assortment of liqueurs, including gin, rum, brandy, schnapps, and absinthe. Bonnie rooted around until she located a half-filled bottle of Golden Harvest. She took a deep swig of the liquor, which sent her into a fit of explosive coughing. When she could breathe again, she took another gulp and then put the bottle back. The liquor made her thoughts pleasantly hazy, blurring her disquieting visions. Still, memories of flickering lights and dancing curtains tried to surface, so she picked up the phone. "Hello," answered Ms. Sakihama after 4 rings. "Hello, ma'am. Is Kevin there? Who is this?" "Bonnie, ma'am. Hold on." The woman's altered cadence made her aversion obvious. A minute passed, and then, "Hello, Bonnie?" "Good morning, Kevin. I was just thinking about you." "Really?" "Yes, I was. In fact, I think I might love you." He chuckled. "That's so sweet. Seriously, you're endearing." "Hey, what did you have for breakfast?" "Waffles," she lied, even as her stomach growled. "I had cereal, but I added fruit, so it was kind of like waffles." "Blech. Hey, do you want to do something later? I could get my dad to drop us off at the arcade." That sounds fun. I have a music lesson at 3, but we can go after that. Maybe we can get some dinner too." "Great. I'll talk to you later." "Bye-bye, Bonnie." "Bye." She replaced the phone in its cradle, swung her arms at her sides, and then climbed the stool to filch a third gulp of the liquor. With that accomplished, she decided on another call. "Hello," bellowed a stern voice at the line's other end. "Is this Clarice?" "No, this is her mother. Who are you?" "I'm her friend. That's all you need to know." "Hey, is she home?" "Listen, you impudent child, you'd better learn some manners before I teach you some." "I was trying to rest. Now I have to deal with this?" There was some muffled conversation, and then, "Mary, is that you?" "It's Bonnie." "What's up, Clarice? What's going on, Bonnie?" "I was just thinking about your birthday. Remember when I deep kissed your boyfriend? My tongue was halfway down his throat, practically in his throat, practically in his stomach. I bet that's further than you've gone with him, you pathetic girl." "Yes, but not as far as you've gone with your pet lizard. How's Scales doing these days anyway? Is she able to shed her skin yet? Go away." "Likewise." "Are you calling for a reason, or just looking for trouble? Bring Ghost Girl along and I'll make it a 2-for-1 deal." "That's okay. Actually, I'm looking to get out of the house." "Do you have any plans today?" "Yes, I'm meeting up with Mary in a little bit, and we're going to spray paint graffiti on walls. Last time, we tagged some old lady's fence and almost got caught. It was hilarious. This other time, we blocked a walkway with a trash can, and some grumpy man tripped over it. It scattered his groceries everywhere. He had to pick it all up and everything." "Awesome. And you two never got caught?" "Nah. We've been chased before, but always got away. With a good hiding spot, we'll be fine. Are you in?" "Definitely. Be at my house by 10, and make sure you bring your skateboard." "Got it." Later. A slight deviation from Inspector Kai's routine that afternoon in Kuala Lumpur would set 2 lives on an irreversible course. Instead of his usual lunch hour, he decided to visit a brightly lit mini-mart 30 minutes early, drawn by a store promotion. Inside, his eyes fell upon a young boy, no older than 7, hovering near the snack shelves with an air of furtiveness. This was Leo, about to commit a petty theft, coerced by the older youths he considered his gang. Rather than a swift arrest, Inspector Kai offered a stern word of caution. Learning of Leo's difficult home life with a single parent and the insidious pull of gang influence, Kai extended an unexpected offer: mentorship. should Leo choose to abandon the gang's path. That single decision reshaped everything. Under Inspector Kai's steadfast guidance for a year, Leo blossomed. The troubled boy, once adrift, began to show an extraordinary intellect, particularly an eidetic memory that soon captivated the nation. He gained widespread acclaim after flawlessly sketching Kuala Lumpur's entire intricate monorail system from memory, a feat that stunned experts and the public alike. But fame, as it often does, brought its own perils. A year later, the Axiom Front, a sinister terrorist organization bent on dismantling regional alliances and forging their own authoritarian union, abducted Leo from the National Zoological Gardens. Chilling footage, emblazoned with their stark emblems, soon emerged, depicting Leo undergoing unspeakable torture. He endured electric shock treatments, and his fingernails and toenails were brutally ripped off, among other unspeakable acts. Their heinous goal was to ignite ethnic tensions towards certain communities within Malaysia and provoke neighboring nations into a regional conflict. A frantic, joint manhunt was launched with police forces across Southeast Asia. The trail, cold and elusive at times, led them from Kuala Lumpur to Bangkok, then to Ho Chi Minh City, before finally pinpointing a desolate, half-finished luxury resort project called Azure Heights, perched precariously on an island off the coast of Vietnam, overlooking Ha Long Bay. Alongside Vietnamese special agents, Inspector Kai and his team stormed the abandoned structures floor by floor. Amidst the chaos of a brutal firefight, Kai pushed upwards alone, reaching the skeletal remains of the top floor. There, the Axiom Front's ruthless commander, a man of Thai origin, held an unconscious Leo on a crumbling balcony above the shimmering bay. The commander's voice cut through the wind, ordering Kai to drop his weapon or watch the boy plummet. Kai complied, his mind racing as he tried to reason with the man. The commander's twisted motive spilled forth. Years ago, a Thai bully had driven his son to suicide. When the Malaysian government later awarded an ASEAN scholarship to that very same bully, the commander had snapped. In his deranged mind, harming another gifted child from Malaysia was a form of poetic justice, a violent herald of his new world order. Then, with a contemptuous sneer, he hurled Leo off the balcony. Kai watched, a primal scream caught in his throat as the small body vanished into the turbulent waves below. The terrorists lunged and they engaged in a savage, desperate battle. Chairs splintered, steel rods bent, and tools flew across the exposed framework of the skyscraper. Finally, with a surge of adrenaline-fueled rage, Kai brought a heavy sledgehammer down, fatally striking the commander's skull. Without a moment's hesitation, he dove into the sea. Underwater, Kai found Leo's limp form. The boy was barely clinging to life as they rushed him ashore. A defibrillator was prepared, and as the second electric shock jolted through Leo's small chest, Kai clutched a colleague, his gaze fixed on the boy, praying with every fiber of his being. Then, a triumphant beep. Heartbeat detected. Leo coughed, expelling seawater, and slowly opened his eyes. Weak but a faint smile touched his lips as his gaze met Kai's. There was a spark of recognition. He knew the man who had once saved him from a street gang had, against all odds, come to save him again. Neither could have ever foreseen how a simple, early lunch break would intertwine their ordinary lives, changing them forever. Alara spoke into the phone, addressing her husband's boss, Michael. I'm sorry, Michael, but David won't be able to make it into the office today. He's still feeling quite unwell. It's been 4 days, Michael complained, a clear note of irritation in his voice. Can I speak to him? You could, if he were awake, Alara replied smoothly. He was up most of the night, terribly sick, and only managed to fall asleep this morning. Please have him call me when he wakes up this morning. Please have him call me when he wakes up then. Absolutely, she affirmed. First thing. Once the call ended, Alara gathered her implements and a worn journal from the kitchen counter. With a determined air, she made her way to the secluded outbuilding at the far end of their property, an old, soundproofed workshop they rarely used. David, wake up! Alara's voice, though quiet, held a sharp edge as she entered the dimly lit space. David jolted awake, his eyes wide with terror, immediately straining against the heavy straps securing him to the cot. The effects of the muscle relaxants, I observe, are clearly waning, Alara noted, watching his struggles dispassionately. With practiced precision, she plunged the pre-filled syringe into his quivering thigh. "Please, Alara, stop," David rasped, his voice raw with desperation. "I swear I've learned my lesson. I'll never betray you again." "You offered similar assurances the last 2 times," she reminded him coolly. "I really mean it this time," he insisted, his words already beginning to slur. "I don't believe you." She selected a gleaming scalpel from her tray. "Please," he whimpered, the sound fading into a mumble as the drugs began to take hold. "Time to review our next set of vocabulary," Alara murmured, opening her journal to a designated page. There, a fresh list of 100 words, each a precise descriptor of David in her eyes, awaited. This was the ongoing curriculum of his re-education, a physical manifestation of his transgressions that had consumed the last 4 days. Her fingers lightly brushed the already scarred landscape of his legs. 200 words adorned his left, 200 more etched onto his right. Today, she decided, we will move to the arms. David was pliant now, the drugs asserting their full dominance. Alara carefully lifted his left arm, beginning with the side of his thumb. The word adulter slowly emerged from the skin. Once complete, she meticulously sealed the fresh cuts with a liquid bandage before moving to the index finger, where deceitful was meticulously inscribed. She continued, each stroke deliberate, until the final word from the day's roster had been carved. "That concludes our session for today," Alara announced, letting the scalpel clatter onto the metal tray. She then carefully dressed the most recent wounds. "Is there anything particular you'd like for lunch, David?" she inquired, her voice even. When only silence met her question, Alara leaned closer, checking his wrist. There was no beat. "Well, isn't that inconvenient?" Alara sighed, a faint frown creasing her brow. She tapped the cover of her journal. "I'd prepared 1,000 words for you, David. I suppose 500 was sufficient to make my point." Alara met Marcus during an internship. She didn't like him very much. He seemed pompous and careless, like his achievements were the only things that mattered. She had no interest in him at all, but he had interest in her. He sat down one day while she was on a coffee break and introduced himself. The conversation that followed was, to her memory, pretty boring. A lot about his accomplishments, his interests, his ideas about things. She thought it was halfway through their conversation that he even thought to ask her name. Then he asked her out. She was about to laugh in his face when he took her hand. It sounds so stupid when it happens in the romance novels and movies, that instant feeling of happiness. But as he held her hand, she could feel it flooding in. She hadn't seen it in him before, but she did now. The kind eyes, the friendly smile. He made her so happy just by holding her hand. They were inseparable after that. In their second year of university, he forgot her art exhibition opening. He showed up to her dorm corridor, hours after everyone had left. She stood there, glaring at him as he sauntered up the hall, her hands full of dirty canapé plates and half-filled sparkling wine glasses. And before she could scream at him, he enveloped her in his arms, his lips finding hers. And again, she could feel that brilliant happiness sending every inch of her skin buzzing as she melted into his warmth, his fiery breath like spiced rum, the trash in her hands falling to the ground. It was like a movie. He later explained he was working late to help afford a better life for them and lost track of time. She was so happy. In their final year of university, Alara found out he had slept with a colleague. She remembered the rage she felt, fiery and all-consuming, as she began to throw everything he owned out of their apartment window. When he finally showed up to find half his belongings on the street, she could see the rage in his eyes as he looked up at her. She tried to meet it, but the heat of his glare pushed her back, shrunk her. When he burst into the room, she nearly caved his head in with a well-thrown mug. He was on her in seconds, before she could say a thing. He held her in his arms, letting her struggle, but not giving her an inch of wiggle room. As she kicked and screamed, he tried to speak with strong confidence, but for the first time ever, she heard his voice crack as he spoke. He was worried about his grades. He was juggling a full course load at school and working nearly full-time. He was very stressed. He and this colleague had become good friends. They got drunk one night. It was an accident. He told her how much he hated himself for betraying her, and that he was the scum of the earth. He cried, and she held him. And he made her happy again. They all make mistakes. That was his. She knew at the time he would get better. Her friends didn't understand. They didn't know how he lit up her brain in so many wonderful ways. At one point, they listed out thing after thing that they pronounced with righteous authority. One time, he yelled at her because she'd lightly burnt his roast, but he made her happy. One solstice festival eve, she caught him grinding on someone else on the dance floor, minutes before midnight, but he made her happy. One time, he forgot to get her anything for her birthday, but threw a fit and brooded the whole day because she had gifted him the wrong brand of headphones. But he made her happy. And now Alara was striding for the door of their small house, her travel bag in tow. He crossed a line and shoved her. And as she fought to keep the tears from running down her bruised purple cheeks, she heard him behind her, bellowing at her, demanding she turn the fuck around and listen to him. But she kept going. She won't take him back. Not this time. And then she heard the tromping of his boots as he advances on her. She can't move fast enough, and he grabs her by the arm, twirling her around, fixing her with the murderous glare. And before she can break away from his grasp, she feels it. She didn't realize what it was the first time it happened, way back at the internship, or in university, or when he made her drop out of grad school. But after all this time, she's become intimately familiar with it. She can feel him doing it. His mind begins to intrude upon hers. She fights it, but he easily splinters her defenses and rushes into her brain, filling her mind with his poison. She can feel it now, the happiness oozing from his fingertips, radiating out of his eyes. It travels up her arms and into her chest, filling it with a dreadful, saccharine warmth and comfort. She struggles against him, try to hold on to her rage, onto her righteous fury. But his unrelenting happiness overwhelms it at every turn, cutting it away. Cutting away the rage, cutting away the bitterness, cutting away her resolve. His will flows through her veins, and just like every other time, the joy and elation and euphoria drown her out. Drown out the need to run, the need to escape, the need to fight. Hot tears of anger and rage flee down her cheeks, escaping her eyes before they are overcome by his mind. And then he takes over. He makes her happy again. He makes her so happy. And she doesn't know how to stop him. The small sprite lauded the elderly gentleman for his exceptional performance as the festive gift giver. He had been truly outstanding. The old man, pleased, assured the sprite he'd gladly do it again. Arthur, in his role as the celebrated figure, had indeed cherished the experience. The exhilaration of delivering countless presents was immense, especially knowing the final gift was destined for his own grandchild. He gazed at little Clara, slumbering peacefully. Her special present, a bright yellow excavator, mirrored the very machine her grandfather operated for work. Arthur eagerly anticipated her awakening and the unwrapping of her new treasure. A sudden wave of exhaustion swept over him, causing his legs to ache. He leaned heavily against the doorway of the small cottage. The sprite took his hand. "You possess a truly kind spirit. That's precisely why I selected you." After the passing of the previous Father Christmas, finding a successor was challenging. But then I understood. The true spirit of the gift giver isn't about speed or physical might. It's about being a loving patriarch. So, I always choose the most benevolent grandfather in the world, and through the power of affection, he saves the holiday season. Arthur managed a weary smile. It was quite an experience, little one. Perhaps next. A cough racked his frail frame. Next year, you might find another method of recruitment. The sprite's cheerful expression faltered, momentarily revealing a human-like sorrow. Ah, yes. About that. Suddenly, Arthur's legs buckled beneath him. His vision blurred. and the sprite's voice, though full of sadness, seemed to drift from a great distance. To ensure all those gifts reach their destinations on time, the gift giver must expend every ounce of heart and vigor. There's simply none left for survival. But your sacrifice has brought millions a joyous Christmas. The sprite gently removed the cat from Arthur's head. Farewell. I must depart now. I only have a year to locate the next finest grandfather in the world. The sprite turned and walked away. Arthur knew he should pursue him, warn the next unwitting elder of his impending fate. But he could barely lift his head to gaze at his sleeping grandchild. Clara was so serene. The small cottage was dim, the window unadorned. He had forgotten to put up decorations, promising himself next year. He was 62. Clara was still so young. The world's most devoted grandfather buried his heavy head in his trembling arms. He would be nothing more than a fleeting memory to her, perhaps a few cherished tales. Your grandpa just drifted off peacefully, you see. He was watching over you. And now he watches from above. If he had been given a choice, if he had been told that embodying Father Christmas would lead to his demise, he would have condemned the other children. He yearned to witness Clara's growth. Perhaps she would become an excavator operator, or a healer, given her fondness for mending dolls, or a heroine who would vanquish malicious sprites, or. Arthur's eyelids finally succumbed. Outside, the inaugural snowflakes began their descent, and the festive gift giver was no more.